How many times have you reached for a can of WD-40, honestly believing you were fixing something on your car? And what if I told you that in 9 out of 10 of those moments, you were actually doing damage you would not see for a year? I have been a mechanic for 15 years. WD-40 has been in every garage I have ever worked in. It is also the single product I get the most calls about. Not because customers ran out, but because they sprayed it on something and the repair bill arrived 6 months later. The dealer never says the words WD-40 on the invoice. The mechanic in the back shop knows what happened. He does not call you to explain it. So before we get into the 9 places where WD-40 quietly wrecks your car, let me settle the most important thing first. WD-40 is not a lubricant. It says nothing of the kind on the can. The name comes from water displacement, 40th formula. That is what it was originally invented to do at Rocket Chemical Company in San Diego back in 1953. Pull up the MSDS sheet that WD-40 themselves publishes. About 50% of what is in that can is Stoddard solvent, also called mineral spirits. About 25% is aliphatic hydrocarbons, also a solvent. Maybe 15% is a light petroleum base oil, and that oil flashes off within days because the solvent is volatile. What you are spraying is a solvent cocktail with a tiny amount of light oil along for the ride. It cleans, it displaces water, it loosens rust. Those 3 things it does well. Anything else you are doing with it, you are betting against chemistry and physics, and the bet is bad. I want to walk you through the 9 places this matters the most, in countdown order, from the small to the expensive, and tell you what I reach for instead in each case. The last one cost me $230 out of my own pocket, so let me start there at the end, and we will work up to it. Number 9 on the list is leather and vinyl interior. You have seen the YouTube tip. A quick spray on a stiff seatbelt buckle, a sticky dashboard knob, the rubber gasket around the door, sometimes the panel right next to it. The buckle works for about 2 days. The dashboard around it loses pigment over the next 4 months. What is actually happening is the Stoddard solvent strips the surface oils and plasticizers out of the vinyl and the dye out of the leather finish. Honest answer is, I have seen this on more than a few interiors. Pale halo around the cup holder where someone got overspray. The fix is $2 of silicone-based vinyl protectant from any auto parts store. For the buckle itself, a dry graphite lubricant, or, if you do not have that, the dry film silicone aerosol used on garage door tracks. Number 8 is brake calipers. Squealing brakes, sticking caliper pins, slow pulling pads. The YouTube comment will tell you, give it a shot of WD-40. Do not. Caliper pins need a high-temperature synthetic grease. Specifically, the silicone-based stuff sold as caliper grease, which holds up at the 450 degrees Fahrenheit a caliper can hit during heavy braking. WD-40 boils off in the first 10 minutes of city driving. What you leave behind is a thin film that attracts brake dust like a magnet, which then grinds into the pin bore and the pad slides. I have pulled apart calipers that had been sprayed twice a year for half a decade. The bores were ovaled. The replacement was about $180 per side at a parts house. The proper grease is $6 a packet and lasts 10 years. Number 7 is the parking brake mechanism. The rear drum hardware on rear disc cars with a drum-in-hat setup. The small lever at the bottom of the disc on others. People spray WD-40 down inside when the cable starts dragging. What you cannot see is the factory grease on the pivot and the cable end. It is a high-pressure moly-based grease designed to take freezing weather and 700-pound spring tension. The solvent wash strips it out. 2 weeks later, the cable feels great. 6 months later, the brake will not release on a January morning, and you are calling a tow truck. The right replacement is a smear of moly grease, the same NLGI Grade 2 stuff used on CV joints, $2 in a packet at AutoZone. Walk through the logic with me for a second. If the factory engineers put a specific grease there, the move is to refresh that grease, not to wash it out and replace it with nothing. Number 6 is rubber suspension bushings, rubber boots on the steering rack, rubber strut bellows, and the rubber bumpers between body and frame. People hear a squeak from the front end and reach for the easy fix. What happens chemically is the startered solvent attacks ethylene propylene diene monomer, EPDM rubber, and nitrile rubber. The bushing swells slightly, then dries and cracks faster than it would have, 2 years instead of 8. In 9 out of 10 cars I look at, where the lower control arm bushings are already split at 60,000 miles, somebody has been spraying something into the front suspension. The right fix for a creaking bushing is silicone spray, specifically the one labeled Rubber Safe or EPDM Safe, $2.50 per can. It does not penetrate, it does not strip, and it lasts about 3 months in the bushing. Listen, if any of these are saving you a future repair bill, I want to hear about it. This channel is going to keep doing these breakdowns, specific products, specific failure modes, real receipts. If that is the kind of thing you want in your feed, hitting subscribe and dropping a comment with what car you drive tells me what to cover next. Now let me get back to the list, and the next 4 are where the real money lives. Number 5 is electrical connectors. This one is everywhere on the internet. Battery terminal corrosion, WD-40. Cleaned the connector. Spray some WD-40 in there to keep moisture out. Both of those are wrong, and they are wrong in the same way. The light oil residue is not a dielectric. It is a hydrocarbon, and over time on the contact face, it actually accelerates oxidation between the pin and the socket because it traps moisture and oxygen instead of excluding them. What you want is dielectric grease, silicone-based, with a dielectric strength of about 500 volts per thousandth of an inch. A 2-ounce tube at any parts house is $4 and lasts your entire ownership of the car. You apply a small dab on the connector seal, not on the contact face itself. The pin penetrates the grease and makes metal-to-metal contact, while the grease seals the connector body against moisture. I have rescued 3 trailer wiring harnesses from corrosion on customer trucks doing exactly this. Ford Super Duty 2014, Ram 2500 2017, GMC Sierra 2019. All 3 came in with intermittent trailer light failures. All 3 had been sprayed with WD-40 twice a year by owners who were trying to prevent corrosion. All 3 had visible green oxidation on the pins under a magnifying glass. The fix in each case was the same. Unplug the connector, clean the pins with a brass brush, dab dielectric grease on the seal, plug it back. Total time per truck, about 20 minutes. Total parts cost, $4. Dielectric grease beats WD-40 by about 10 years of connector life, and it costs less than a coffee. Number 4 is timing chains and drive belts. The squeaky belt. The clicky timing chain on a cold start. The internet says spray it down. What you are actually doing is two things. 1. You are washing out the factory tensioner lubrication, which on some Hondas and Subarus is a sealed hydraulic unit that depends on engine oil pressure and is not supposed to be touched. 2. You are leaving a solvent residue on a serpentine belt or a timing belt that softens the rubber compound. Belt life drops, slippage goes up under load. The squeaky belt almost always wants either a tensioner replacement or a new belt, not a spray. The clicky timing chain almost always wants an oil change with the right viscosity for the engine, and a careful look at whether the variable valve timing solenoids are gunked up. If you must spray something on a noisy belt as a diagnostic, and only as a diagnostic to see if the noise changes, use plain water.
The noise will quiet for 30 seconds, then come back. That tells you it is the belt or the pulley contact, and not something else. WD-40 quiets it for 2 days while it eats the rubber. Number 3 is what I call the false fix on dead O-rings. A leaking power steering hose. A weeping rear differential pinion seal. A dripping valve cover gasket. The classic move: pop the hood, spray WD-40 along the seam. The leak appears to stop for 48 hours. The driver thinks the seal soaked it up and resealed. What actually happened is the volatile solvent washed the oil off the surface, and your eye stopped seeing the wet spot. The rubber underneath continues to fail. When the part lets go, here is what happens next. The seal goes from a slow seep to a catastrophic spray, usually at the worst possible moment. I had a customer with a 2013 Ford Escape who did this on a power steering hose for 4 months.
The hose blew at 65 miles per hour on the interstate near Toledo. The repair was the hose, the pump, and a tow, about $900 total. If a rubber seal is starting to weep, the correct response is to identify which seal and replace it. The wrong response is to spray mask the symptom for 2 weeks while you forget about it. Number 2 is door locks. This is the one your dad probably told you about. Winter is coming. Frozen locks. Give it a shot of WD-40. The problem is, door cylinders use a dry, graphite-based lubricant on the wafers and the cylinder housing. That is, the small black dust you see on a lockpick if you have ever taken a cylinder apart. The Stoddard solvent washes the graphite right out. Then dust and dirt that gets sucked into the lock during normal use stick to the residual oil film. About 4 to 8 weeks later, the lock binds and the key turns sluggishly. Eventually, it does not turn at all. The right product: powdered graphite in a small puffer bottle, about $3 at a hardware store, or a dry PTFE lock lubricant in an aerosol that flash evaporates and leaves a dry film. Either one beats WD-40 by about 2 years of lock life. I have replaced enough Toyota and Subaru door cylinders to know the pattern, and the one that taught me this lesson personally: number 1, window regulators. About 4 years back, I had a 2009 Honda CR-V at 158,000 miles. The driver's side window started getting sluggish in winter. The regulator motor sounded like it was working harder than it should. I followed the same advice I would have given any customer 10 years earlier. I sprayed WD-40 up into the channel where the glass rides. Worked great for about 6 weeks. Then one cold January morning in Dayton, the motor seized halfway up. $230 at the Honda parts counter for an OEM regulator and motor assembly. The independent shop that pressed it in showed me the burned commutator brushes when I picked it up. The friction load on the motor had gone up because the factory dielectric grease on the gear teeth and the channel felts had been washed out by the solvent. The motor was pulling extra current, trying to drive the glass through dry channels with degraded gear lubrication. The brushes cooked. That happens in about 15,000 cycles instead of the 80,000 the factory spec assumes. What you want is a thin smear of white lithium grease, NLGI grade 2, on the gear teeth and the metal channels, and a separate silicone aerosol on the rubber felts and the glass guide rails. Total cost, about $7 for both products, which will service every window on your car for the next decade.
If you had asked me 4 years ago what the right product was, I could have told you. But I reached for the easy can because I had been raised to. That is why I made this video. And here is why I would take that trade every time. $5 for the correct grease beats $230 for a replacement regulator motor. The math is not subtle. The marketing department at WD-40 spent 70 years convincing the average driver that one blue and yellow can solves every lubrication problem in the garage. The chemistry of what is actually in the can has not changed since 1953. The marketing is what changed. So where does WD-40 actually belong? It is excellent at 3 things. It displaces water. Spray it on an ignition module after you washed the engine bay, and you may save yourself a no-start. It cleans. Solvent on a rag will lift grease and grime off engine parts without leaving residue.
And it loosens corroded fasteners short-term. Give a rusted lug nut a shot. Let it sit 10 minutes. Get the bolt out. For deep penetration on truly seized fasteners, a dedicated penetrant like PB Blaster or Croyle will outpull WD-40 in the side-by-side tests every mechanic firm has run since the 80s. But for moderate corrosion, WD-40 is fine. 3 jobs, that is it. 3 jobs WD-40 will do for the rest of your life as a car owner. And the same can be sitting on your shelf. The one you've been reaching for to fix everything is the same can that has been quietly wrecking 9 other systems on your car for the same years. So go back to that opening question. How many times have you used WD-40 thinking you were fixing something? And how many of those 9 places are on your car right now, slowly counting down to the bill? The good news is the fix is small. 5 products, all under $6 a piece at any parts house. White lithium grease for window regulators and gear mechanisms. Silicone spray for rubber bushings and door seals. Dielectric grease for electrical connectors. Powdered graphite or dry PTFE for door locks. Moly-based grease for caliper pins and parking brake hardware. Add a tube of vinyl protectant if you want to round it out. That covers leather and dashboards. You can fit the whole set in a small toolbox drawer. Total investment, about $30. That $30 buys you the next 10 years of correct lubrication on every system on the car that the WD-40 can does not actually serve. I keep mine in a labeled plastic tackle box on the workbench. Moly grease, lithium grease, dielectric grease, silicone spray, graphite powder. When something needs lube, I look at what the manufacturer used originally, and I match it. That is the entire methodology. The mechanic does not want you to fail. He wants you to know where the boundary of the tool is. The boundary is what keeps your car alive past 200,000 miles, and the boundary of WD-40 is right there on the can. In 3 words, the marketing department printed small at the bottom. Water displacement, 40th formula. What is the place on your own car where you have been spraying WD-40 the longest? Drop it in the comments. I read every one, and I am genuinely curious how many of you are running it on door locks. That is the one nobody warned me about either.